He has a presentation also. But before that, I would request Professor Anil Gupta ji, who would be presenting the lead lecture of the day. He would be setting the perspective of what is in store for us in next 3 days. His lead lecture would be followed by the inaugural session. Before I request Professor Gupta to come forward with his lecture, I would just briefly introduce Dr. Anil Gupta, who although needs no introduction, but briefly a few words for him. Dr. Anil Gupta is resilience and sustainability strategist who's worked for government, industry, and academia for over 25 years. Presently, he is professor of India's National Institute of Disaster Management. He has steered several international and national projects of policy planning and research and published over 25 books and 70 papers. He is a WMO expert, team member on climate statement, South Asia core group member of IUCN CEM, vice chair of Association of Occupational and Environmental Health, and editor of Springer Nature book series on disaster resilience. I would advise all the participants who are here, please do take moments out and read what Dr. Anil Gupta himself writes and also endorses in all of these journals and these, disaster management, disaster resilience books. In the past, he has worked for CSIR, NEEDI, PMI, NMDC, SciCon, and state governments and universities. It's my privilege to welcome you again, Professor Saab, and thank you so much for all your support and leadership. I would now request you to please present your lead lecture on this very important subject, which we have chosen for this online training program of developing resilience and in industrial infrastructure. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Wab, and all colleagues, Mr. Akhil, Mr. Mainak, Mr. Harshit, and all the colleagues from FICCI, and respected Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal Saab, Executive Director in IDM, General Bhardwaj, who would also be joining the formal inaugural session. And I'm very happy that we could mobilize very good speakers in this session. Dr. Ilangovan. In fact, we are known to each other, myself and Dr. Ilangovan also, for more than 2 decades. So very long journey when he was Joint Director. So it is really a matter of pleasure that and very important theme because Government of India has taken a very ambitious initiative on promoting resilient infrastructure. That is in the form of coalition of disaster resilience infrastructure. But whenever we talk of infrastructure, the primarily what comes to people's mind at first is something like urban infrastructure, or the housing. Yes, that is very important aspect of infrastructure. But when we look at the various kind of needs, then we find and the kind of sustainable living and a good state of living that we call it quality of life, we find that these amenities, products, and services are coming from a number of services, and which on the back of which a wide range of infrastructure systems are working. Many infrastructure systems we cannot see. For example, we enjoy the benefits of electricity, but many of us or many of the common citizen, they might have not seen that how the electric power is produced. And when they talk of infrastructure, probably they talking about the hydroelectric power plant would not readily come to the forefront of their mind. Similarly, when we talk of the concrete, when we talk of our houses, then we talk of cement, but the industry sometimes does not readily come to the mind that it is the industry where all these things are being produced. So, for example, we have a LED TV or any kind of electronic gadgets. Those are coming from various kind of industries. So when we realize that all kind of services and amenities are coming from industries, and we we are now moving towards achieving the goal of Sendai framework, goals set under the Sendai framework of DRR, where very interestingly, the same period, we are also targeting to achieve the principles set under the 17 set of sustainable development goals. So when we are looking at these, it appears impossible to achieve a kind of disaster resilience in our life and services if we do not talk about these production systems, these industries for their resilience. And when we talk of industries, many times there has also been another kind of dichotomy that for quite a long time, when we have been discussing about industrial disaster resilience, the aspect that comes to the forefront is the chemical accidents. And then it gradually, when we started realizing, when the NIDM FICCI, and we have been in our joint endeavors also, and otherwise also, when we started focusing that we have to look at the multi-hazard kind of things, then the layers by layers, the new understanding emerged. And now we are asking the industries also to start looking at multi-hazard resilience. And then we are talking about multi-hazard resilience. Certainly the infrastructure systems within the industry itself is an infrastructure systems. But if we analyze the industry from a kind of a micro point of view, each and every segment, each and every plant in the industry has several kind of infrastructure units. So looking at resilience of these infrastructure units, I think is very important for the overall resilience of the governance in society. So I have a PowerPoint presentation here to give some kind of a thought process, to set some kind of a stage for this 3 days training program, which is dedicated on developing infrastructure resilience in within the industry. When I talk of industry, it does not mean only one unit. It is an industrial setting basically, because when we talk of industry, it may be a major industrial plant. It may be a conglomeration of medium scale number of units, or it may be a large number of small units are located in some industrial areas. For example, in many of the cities, many of the metropolitan cities also, we have industrial pockets where small industries and large numbers are also located. So in fact, we have to look at all kind of industries when we discuss about the infrastructure resilience. Certainly, the major industries will come at the forefront because the damage to their infrastructure would have very serious repercussions. So let me share my PowerPoint presentation. Is my PowerPoint visible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. I did the full screen. Is it okay?
Yes. Yes, sir. Yes. Please
So
go ahead.
thank you. So I have put the title like disasters, climate change, and resilient infrastructure, because now climate change is a reality, and when we talk of disasters, we cannot leave the implications of climate change. Why I'm talking of implications of climate change also when we discuss about disasters, because it is not only the catastrophic events, but even the long term changes brought by the climate change are also posing major impediment to the resilience of these infrastructure. And then whenever any kind of extreme events or any kind of disasters hit these industries or industrial units, then the devastation is much more than we anticipate. For example, the sea level rise, as we were discussing about the ports. For example, sea level rise, that is not an instantaneous event. It is a continuous process, but as a result of the climate change implications, if the sea level is high and any kind of storm surge, any kind of cyclone, any kind of flooding or tsunami takes place, certainly the implications in terms of damage is going to be much higher. Then when we discuss about infrastructure resilience, so the word itself is very important, and it says that it is little more than the structure. As when we talk about the infrared rays also, so we go little beyond. So similarly here also, it is talking about little more than the structure, and that is very interesting and very useful. Then the second aspect that comes to us is extent of infrastructure. That which are the infrastructure we really need to worry about, because there is a wide range of infrastructure systems, and we need to have to put some kind of a priority. We need to put some kind of a more focus, less focus, emergent needs kind of things. So we will need to identify the industrial infrastructures, the services of which are highly inevitable and of critical in nature. For example, power supply. For example, the communication systems. For example, the food kind of resources. So that is also a very important aspect. Now, this talking about the infrastructure resilience and industrial infrastructure systems also becomes very important, because past 10 years or so, the focus in India has been moving towards more of a putting emphasis on sectoral dimensions in disaster management. Because we are trying to bring mainstreaming of disaster risk management approaches into the overall development process. Then how we bring mainstreaming? So we have to look at sectoral dimensions. For example, then we say the petrochemical sector, we say the hydrocarbon sector, we say the mining sector, we say that the power sector kind of things. And then as provided by the legislations related with disaster management in India, Disaster Management Act 2005, and also on the lines of the National Disaster Management Plan, now each and every ministry which are responsible for a particular sector is required to develop a disaster management plan. And when we talk of sectoral disaster risk reduction or sectoral strategies for disaster risk reduction and disaster management plan, then infrastructure forms a very important dimension where we can anticipate, or we can understand the risks associated with the damage to the kind of physical damages. Because even recently we have completed the National Disaster Management Plan for the agriculture sector. So for quite a long time, when people used to talk about agriculture, the focus usually goes on crops and plants which produce us food. But there are a lot of infrastructure systems associated with the food processing, associated with the agro product processing. Then infrastructure systems associated with the manufacturing of the pesticides and fertilizers. The infrastructure systems which for manufacturing of machineries which are used in the agriculture related work. Then the graders, seed graders, transportation of the agro products, then warehousing. So many things appeared to us when we started analyzing the sector, and then we found that each and every sector which appears to us primarily as a kind of a non-structural sector, that also has a lot of infrastructure components in it. And that has actually strengthened the Honorable Prime Minister's 10-point agenda on disaster risk management, because the item 1 of that has prescribed for imbibing disaster risk management principles by each and every sector. So now this 3 days program, we are focusing on a range of industries, because industry, sometimes we say that industrial sector, but industrial sector again is a sector of sectors, a sectors of it's so many sectors are there. So, and certainly when we talk of resilient infrastructure within industry also, the focus has to be multi-hazard. And the cyclone is showing that how not only the civil infrastructure or the public infrastructure, but also the industrial infrastructure is prone to various kind of risk and various kind of damages. So why infrastructure is important? Not only from the point of view of the Sendai framework for DRR, but also for achieving the goals as we the 17 set of 17 goals, SDGs, particularly the 6, 7, and 8, which find that infrastructure is a very kind of a key component. For example, if we refer to clean technology, for example, when we talk of the kind of a green energy, so all the things and climate actions, so all these important aspects have very important integration, that call for very important integration of the infrastructure system resilience and also the infrastructure system proofing against the risk of climate change. So that is very important. And why the focus on infrastructure? So left side, if we look at the kind of picture, so with the growing population and with the growing demand, I think there is an increasing pressure on not only the urban infrastructure but also the industrial infrastructure for its expansion, for producing more, because we need more and better amenities and services. So that is very important. Now, in the Asia Pacific, past 7-8 years, there is a very high pace in infrastructure growth. This COVID pandemic has certainly brought some level of impediment, but once we are free from COVID, then again the focus will be on infrastructure, because in order to achieve the sustainable development goals, in order to improve the quality of life of the people, the infrastructure services and amenities are very important. And the similar way, like we want the improvement in the industrialization, similarly, or rather than even more, they at high rate, the urban the sprawl is also increasing, and urban populations are actually the people who are putting more and more pressure on in form of their demands to the industrial systems, because the urban settings are the energy intensive, others urban settings are more they require the products and services which are more and more provided by a range of industries. So that is very important aspect. Then when we talk of industrial resilience, then there is also a kind of input output relationship, and also the relationship with the civil society. So industrial resilience or industrial infrastructure resilience cannot be thought in isolation with urban development or in general the economic development, including the rural dimensions also, because a large number of workforce employed in the subsidiaries of various large scale industries are coming from the rural areas, and a large number of commercial relationships and the sustainability in terms of market and financial resilience of these industries and businesses require urban sustainability. So when we talk of industrial resilience or industrial sustainability, I think we will need to go little more integrated way. So that is an important aspect. And then there has to be a logical layer approach to infrastructure resilience, means that infrastructure resilience of one particular plant can be achieved in isolation, but of the overall plant we will need to look at the resilience of the various segments, and various segments would require various kind of things for bringing in resilience. Beside this, when we talk of the infrastructure resilience, what has been our observations that many of the times our focus remains on engineering dimensions, the construction and other kind of things. But if we analyze the past disasters and the damages caused by the past disasters, we find that the non-engineering actors are equal contributors. For example, the management decisions, management related planning, the financial allocations, timely deployment of workforce. So these things which are non-engineering actions, which are also very important aspects. Beside this, the behavioral dimensions, as I recall, the IOCL plant where this Jaipur fire incident has took place almost 10 years back. As a chance, I had visited that plant just a year back from that incident that took place along with the team. And we had noted certain kind of the human behavioral dimensions and human awareness issues also. So in many of the plants, even when we analyze the BHEL the poisonous gas release incident in Bhilai. So we found these kind of things, and most of the accidents we find that human angle is a very important aspect. So what are the important issues and lessons when we discuss about the resilience in general and industrial infrastructure resilience in particular? As I referred to the item 1 of the Prime Minister's Agenda 10 on disaster risk management that Honorable PM he gave during his inaugural remarks in the 6th ASEAN Ministerial Conference that took place in 2016 December, then the Sustainable Development Goals. And this is also important that in order to safeguard vital and critical infrastructure systems, which are the backbone of economy. Why this is important? Because a number of other infrastructure systems are depending on that. For example, I recall the year of even in the recent past also, sometimes the failure of electricity can affect our transportation system, including our railways, including many of other industrial operations, including the water supply. So, and to a wide range of scales also. So that is another very important aspect that we need to take care when we talk of industrial infrastructure resilience. Then there are geographical dimensions which are also important. Industrial infrastructure resilience in coastal areas, industrial infrastructure resilience in the dryland areas, or the industrial infrastructure resilience in the hilly areas. The concerns will vary. For example, looking at the kind of challenges that geographical landmass faces. For example, in the northeastern areas, the focus may come on the landslide, earthquake, and these kind of things. Whereas in coastal areas, cyclone will remain one of the prime concern besides other kind of disasters. So that is also an important aspect. And I often associate the infrastructure resilience or industrial resilience together with the broad concept of sustainable businesses. In fact, now the industries globally are working out that how industries and corporate systems transform itself to become more responsible, and the concept that we had earlier that call it responsible care. So responsible care for their sustainability, responsible care for environment, and responsible care the attitude for towards the people. So that is very important dimension, and it has 5 major components that we often talk about, that include the governance related issues, the environment related issues, the social dimensions, health and safety, and financial. And I think there is a lot of integration among these 5 aspects. But health and safety, when we talk of health and safety, then primarily it is the workers related issues, are the emergency management related issues. But when we talk of infrastructure resilience within industry also, then it is the financial aspect that also comes into picture, because any kind of major damage to infrastructure systems leads to major financial disruption also. And this is a picture that shows that how the issues emerge. And that is very important, that the aging is very important aspect, that the age of that infrastructure system or the particular unit. So that also contributes to the kind of a vulnerability. And maybe with the passage of time, with the change of technology, with the change of operational procedures, it might require some kind of modification and improvements. And it is the management decision whether we implement those kind of modifications which are required and recommended, or we timely or with some kind of delay. So that will have a direct bearing on the kind of a losses in the functionality. And functionality is something very importantly related with the infrastructure system resilience when we talk about. Because when I talk of infrastructure, I often associate the word system with it. So infrastructure in isolation is not complete. Infrastructure requires a system to make it fully functional. So that is very important. And with the passage of time, the infrastructure systems can lose its functionality to some extent, but certainly it may have some kind of a residual functionality. So whether the efforts are being taken adequately in advance during the risk management phase, or whether we wait for an event to affect our infrastructure and then after the disruption, we try to restore. So there is a lot of challenges in terms of financial losses also when we are less prepared to, and when we put in these kind of improvements in advance. Then this is a picture that shows the interdependence on various infrastructure systems. So this is again a very important aspect, that how one infrastructure system is supporting the other kind of infrastructure system. So within the plant also, for example, a number of sorry, we have been discussing about the grouping of industries in terms of raw materials, grouping of the industries in terms of various other kind of services. Then some of the industries have their captive power plants. Sometimes the waste material are the byproduct of one industry is the raw material for other plant. So this grouping and the kind of a relationship between various industries, industrial units, and various industries, and then broadly looking at various kind of infrastructure. So that is also a very important concern when we talk about infrastructure resilience. Then, as in the beginning also, I have been I was referring about the structure. That structure is a limited concern about infrastructure. So, and when we say infrastructure, so it is about the functionality. Infrastructure is little going beyond the structure, and for structural resilience, it requires structural system resilience, and for making the system keeping functional, we also need to talk about the subset facilities. I'm sorry, there is a spelling mistake here. It is not faculty, it has to be facilities. Subset facilities. And a simpler example I can give of the subset facilities, since we are in the COVID period, the hospital system, health system. For keeping a health system operational, it is not only building the structural safety of the building that will be sufficient, but the system to keep functional, we need continuous electricity, and maybe in case of electric disruption, for that we need to have a backup electricity system. And then, for example, we need to have the waste management system keeping functional in our hospitals. We need to have regular water supply, and then alternative water supply systems also. So these kind of things, these are the subset facilities within industries also. I think these subset facilities are very, very important aspect to keeping these infrastructure systems functional. Then input output issues, very important, because any kind of infrastructure systems, there are some materials which are required to keep that system functional, and then there is some kind of a byproduct or some kind of waste material being produced from that infrastructure in order to in the process to be taken out. So these two dimensions of input output are even the products also. So the very important aspect to keep that system functional. For example, a cement plant, if there are no buyers, the marketing fails. If they, and then this system cannot continue. The infrastructure system cannot remain functional. So functionality is very important aspect. Then it is not only the beams and columns only. Certainly that structural strength, that safety is important for earthquakes and other kind of disasters. But within that infrastructure systems, even the fittings and fixtures, many times major fire incident took place because of the lack of maintenance in the fittings and fixtures. And when we analyzed various kind of disaster events took place in the past, we find that the smaller mistakes or smaller ignorance or small kind of things with these fittings and fixtures led to major disasters. Then certainly the safety and prevention, that is very important aspect, because that leads to the performance of the human capital. That leads to not only the human capital, that also leads to the performance of the machineries or the equipments. And for infrastructure system to remain functional, the performance and accuracy of these equipments are very important. If we recall the Bhopal disaster itself, we find that the pressure gauge that was showing wrong readings for quite a long time, and then people started not looking at it. And even when the time it was showing a very high level pressure, people did not look at it because people thought that it is always malfunctional. So these kind of things should be kept in mind. Resources I referred to, because raw materials are required for making any system functional. For example, in many of the plants, even the cooling is inevitable, and for cooling the water is required. So if the cooling water is not available, or alternative mechanisms are not available, are not functional, the system has to be shut down. So then interdependence I already referred to. Then human resources, very important aspects. Many times when we talk of infrastructure resilience, we do not talk of the people who are important in keeping that infrastructure system functional. That is very important. The operators are the skilled, particularly the skilled people, particularly the people who are to take decisions. They are very important part of that infrastructure systems, which is an important aspect. Then emergency response procedures. Even if we have made a building which is fully resilient to earthquake, but certainly in case of a major mishap, in case of a major earthquake, or in case of a major cyclone, a major fire, this emergency response has to be fully in place, and well rehearsed emergency procedures, and with mock drills. So I think these are very important aspects. And why I am referring to these aspects, because many times when we focus on infrastructures, most of the focus goes on hard aspects, and these softer dimensions remain unaddressed. But these are very important aspects. And then certainly resilience, how how we are able to bring back normalcy in the system at soonest. So that is the very important aspect of this resilience. We were discussing about ports, so I think ports are very important aspect, because a number of other entrepreneurships and number of other commercial activities, industrial activities are depending on the services of port. In fact, during the lockdown period, when the first and second lockdown was there, and many of the industries were closed by the order, the ports were allowed to remain functional with the lesser number of people, because those were the requirement for shipping, for requirement for transportation of very important goods. And so both the sides. And I happened to visit some of the ports also that time, that how during the coronavirus period, lockdown period, they were trying to operate within the required kind of a sustainability and resilience. Then this is again very important aspect, and very rarely being discussed about this. Some of the participants and some of the experts might have read about the sick building syndrome. Many times the building construction was good, but the design is improper. And many times we find that the workers and the people, they fall sick, and very frequently, and then it leads to absenteeism, and then it leads to lack of maintenance, and lack of that hampers your productivity, and so many other things also. This syndrome is very important, and this also relates with the kind of indoor and outdoor environment associated with that kind of infrastructure. For example, the kind of level of pollutants and the level of toxicants being released, and within that environment, and how these workers and the operators and management officials, executives, are exposed to various kind of things. So this talks about the design of these infrastructure systems, the design of particularly design of buildings, the ventilation related issues, lighting related issues, and the temperature related issues. So many aspects which are often not discussed during infrastructure resilience discourse, but very important, particularly in the work environment. There are some other dimensions which are important. Uh, Robustness. Yes. So a completeness is very important. A one-way approach would not be enough. So we will have to look at a robust approach. And robust approach is basically looking at all the dimensions, as I was referring to the interdependence. As I also refer to that, if we want to have the industrial resilience, we will have the resilient power backup, resilient water supply. So these kind of things also. Then certainly the capacity to learn from past mistakes. In fact, this is one of the agenda in the Prime Minister's Agenda 10 on disaster risk management also. Then flexibility, that is very important aspect, that how the system is flexible. So if the system is not flexible, it cannot adapt to a new situation. In fact, that was a drawback being realized during the lockdown phase, and we had to face some of the industrial mishaps also. That the new to new situations, how the prescriptions, guidelines, and manuals could have been modified at the earliest. So that was very much required. Then certainly redundancy are the alternatives. So that is very important to have an alternatives, because when one system fails, how to keep functional with alternative systems. So these kind of things. Then safe failure, that is very important aspect in industrial infrastructure resilience, to have a safe fail procedure. So that is very important, that we have a well written, well practiced safe fail procedure. Similarly, a kind of a shutdown procedure, an emergency shutdown procedure, and normal shutdown procedure. All these things are very important aspect. And often we discuss about chemical accident, chemical industrial disaster management. And I think these principles need to be extrapolated. These principles need to be customized for looking with the broad aspect of industrial infrastructure resilience also. Then certainly looking at a broader angle, the kind of a business resilience, certainly these 5 points are very important. And I just wanted to refer to this, that a resolution is very important. The kind of a collective wisdom or collective understanding that we have to address this challenge. Then what kind of resilience we require, so that the disruption period is minimum, disruption period of setback is minimum, and we bring back normalcy. So return, then we should not stop. We also have to keep reimagine that what can go wrong, and that is very important aspect. The risk management is a simpler word, that what can go wrong. And in the HAZOP also, this hazard and operability analysis, this question comes to our mind, and we ask ourselves that what if, and that is called a procedure, what if procedure. So what if this goes like this way, what it goes like this way, so low flow, high flow, these kind of things. So reimagine with based on the previous incidences, that okay, if it happens again, or if this time it happened in during the daytime, let us see if it happens during the night time. So, or if it happens when the wind is speeded on the other side, so what will happen? Then we looking to that reform. So looking to that, then we have to improve our systems, in infrastructure systems, structural and also in the functional dimension. So that is very important, and this will contribute to greatly to the concept of business continuity, because now I'm asking the business units, business entities, and business schools to rework business continuity in a new avatar, that is disaster resilient business continuity. Because now it has proved that disasters can cause major business disruptions, as proven by the coronavirus pandemic period also, and a number of recent disasters that has affected industry a lot. So that is very important. And for that, actually, running as business as usual would not do. I think we'll have to come up as a preferred scenario, that what are the better approaches, and we will have to look at the innovations and initiatives. And this is a picture. So this framework tells that the normal emergency procedures would be little inadequate, and basically the business continuity has to come at the center, so that our infrastructure systems has to be kept functional. So that is very important, and that will be a two-way approach. And this picture shows that the strategies for restoring our infrastructure system, if we keep well in advance, then the impact of crisis would be very shorter. And that is very important, because even a small crisis can lead to major devastation. I refer to one kind of example. For example, a metro like Delhi or something, and our sewage system fails, then just imagine what will happen. And similarly, within industry, if our power supply system fails, are now more and more trains are running on electric supply, and anytime, whenever even a minor disruption to electric supply, so these kind of challenges are being faced. And when we look at the infrastructure system resilience, I think we will have to go different layers of the protection. So protection of the hard infrastructure, the protection of the workingness or functionality, and protection of the relationship with the other infrastructure systems, governance systems, and also looking at the social dimensions, because sometimes even the industries also suffer because of some kind of a conflicting situations with the nearby communities also over some kind of a scarce resource. So these kind of things can also be should also be kept in mind. And supply chain, I think that is again a very important aspect. Supply chain, workplace access, these are again very important aspect, because workplace access, if the employees cannot reach to the workplace, if there is some kind of disruption, maybe outside the industry, not within the industry, but certainly it is going to affect your industrial operations also. And this game of resilience, or this entire understanding of resilience, I think will have to broaden this horizon, from narrowly looking at only hard infrastructure, or only looking at the chemical industrial disasters, to a broad perspective of disaster management plan for businesses. And here, when we talk of disaster management plan for businesses, I think it will yield much better results in preventing the economic losses also, and putting it more proactive approach to including the financial strategies, including the alternatives, including the identification of the capacity building needs of the system. So that would be very important, and that will also help in more effective monitoring. Then certainly the newer issues. Recently, the old list of disasters, I think it has to be further updated, because recently we have started understanding that the new kind of disasters like fog, smog, air pollution, water emergencies, for example, sudden contamination of water bodies. So these kind of things can create a sudden unnoticed challenge, and without a warning, these kind of challenges, and then our operations can face major challenges. Heat. Now, our study jointly with the government of Germany in Telangana and Andhra shown that the high heat conditions, particularly during the summer months, is posing additional risk to our industrial operations in some of the states, particularly Andhra, Telangana, these kind of places. So these are new issues. Electronic waste, certainly going to be a new dimension of risk management for all of us. So I think we need to start thinking about these very proactively. Currently, in the recent past, we have, yes, we all are aware about the national disaster management plan, which provides a kind of a umbrella plan for the entire country, that how at various levels, national level, state level, local level, these initiatives would be taken. And then currently we are trying to promote the sectoral level disaster management plan. Recently we have supported various ministries. Currently we are supporting the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change for developing their disaster management plan, and also the Ministry of Fertilizers and Chemicals. And this subject of chemical and industrial accidents is likely to be transferred very soon to the Ministry of Chemicals and Fertilizers, as new code is already in place, which is in draft phase. And once it is notified, that impact will be affected very shortly. Then, as I was referring to the sudden contamination of water bodies, so it may be sudden contamination of water bodies from we are drying water for the industrial supplies also, or the industrial colonies, the people living within industrial premises, our own workers. So these kind of things would also be important, because industrial functionality would depend on the functionality of the life of the employees also, of the management people also, so and the nearby societies also. So we'll have to look at much more broader perspective. And for this, basically, now I think we will we'll need to look at a new views with the new viewpoints to the cost benefit analysis kind of tools, like the life cycle assessment kind of tools. Recently we have done some kind of recently a study on end of life disposal challenges of the solar photovoltaic cells. That is that is another kind of industrial challenge, that how the waste management related issues can pose additional challenges. So waste management infrastructures, the effluent treatment plant, hazardous waste treatment plant, all these are also infrastructures. So how their maintenance and kind of a resilience would also be important in industrial resilience. And I think we will have to relook at technical, human, systemic, and environmental dimensions in a new set of frame when we are talking about a whole holistic approach. And for this, basically, the business impact assessment, the procedure of business as impact assessment will have to be seen in a new viewpoint with the new narratives. Why new narratives? Because now we are moving very forward, very fast in utilizing the automation, not only automation, but the robotics. For example, the firefighting, the more and more application of the robotic robot run the firefighting equipments are also coming. Some of already in Indian plants, also Indian industries, also some have already been procured and are in practice. So these are kind of a new lessons, and the new approach in the business management, that we call it the change management. So how we change with the new technology, how we change with the new set of disaster risk, and how we change with the new set of business management principles. I think we'll have to look at the better version of disaster management plan for our businesses. And as this is already known that the without a plan are having a plan. So I think certainly I would not be going to detail, because all of us agree that having a planned approach is always much more beneficial. But yes, the plans based on the traditional approach of business impact assessment I think we need some improvement, and we need improvement in the business impact assessment approach, because these disasters, natural disasters and also kind of technological disasters, are posing additional risk to our industrial operations and industrial infrastructure systems also. Then this is a additional layer of understanding that when we talk of resilience, certainly which is also trying to address the black swan kind of events like the unknowns, but we need to go little more, one step more. And what is the one step more? That we should not talk of the resilience, we should not limit the talks and discuss objectives to the resilience of the present generation. When I talk of present generation, not talking only of our children, I am talking of the present generation of the professionals. So we should talk about the resilience in the industrial infrastructure systems for the second generations of managers, for the second generations of the professionals and engineers who are going to come and work with those infrastructure systems. Otherwise, they will have to inherit the burden of lack of resilience in the infrastructures, and they will have to redo everything. And I think that is less desirable. So with these, some of the thoughts from my side on how do we need to look at various kind of infrastructure systems associated with the industries and within the industry, and also having influence on the industrial operations and businesses. And thank you very much for inviting me to deliver this talk. And I'm very happy and very sure that this 3 days program would be a great success. Thank you, and over to you, Mr. Ruab.
Thank you so very much, Professor Anil Gupta ji, for your very, very detailed, I would say a very informative, a visionary sort of lead lecture. You not only set the perspective, but you've touched upon some very important points because resilience per se is relatively a newer term in the area of disaster risk reduction. Although for all the practitioners, it was always the most important and integral part. But we are now speaking more from a resilient perspective. And I think one very important takeaway from your lead lecture was when you emphasized more on, you said that design and development of infrastructure is important, but the operation and maintenance part is equally important, or maybe more important sometimes, because laying down a sanitation network or a pipeline network in for sewerage is one thing, but not maintaining it and not operating it properly would lead for it to become a problem in case of a flood or a cyclone or an extreme weather event. So building good infrastructure, modern infrastructure is important, but operating it and maintaining it with the equal zeal, I think is a very strong message which I could gather from your presentation. And of course, there was so much of knowledge, knowledge galore, I would say, and I'm already getting messages from our participants who are very excited to hear your insights on the subject, and also a hand on your presentation, which I've assured them that they'll get it by the when we give away the certificates. When they download the certificate, they'll get a copy of this presentation. But many congratulations to you, Professor Gupta, for some great, very deep work being done in this area of disaster risk reduction, especially resilient infrastructure related issues. What you said, I think it doesn't come in a ready template. I know there's years of research which has gone behind it. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, Professor Gupta. On that note, I would quickly like to welcome Dr. Muzaffar Ahmed Sahab, former member, National Disaster Management Authority, and currently a member of the FICCI CIDM board. Very good afternoon, sir. Thank you so much for joining. And I would also like to welcome Dr. R. Ilangovan, Director General, DG Firstly. Very warm welcome to you, sir. Very thank you so much for spending time and being with us on this very important day when we've launched this relatively a very important online training program on an important subject, which is developing resilience and industrial infrastructure. And who knows more about industries than Dr. Ilangovan himself? Thank you so much for joining us, sir, this afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, we will soon be joining. We will soon have General Bhardwaj also joining us. But I think if I can have a go ahead from Major General M.K. Bindal, Executive Director, National Institute of Disaster Management. Sir, if you agree, if you allow, shall we commence with the inaugural session, sir? Yes, we can see your camera. Thank you so much, and very warm welcome again, General Bindal. Thank you so much for your unwavering support and leadership towards this very partnership between FICCI and NIDM. We've really outnumbered our own expectations at times. We initially, when we started a year back, it was an humble beginning through an MOU. But now where we are today, I think we have set the bar really high, and thanks to your leadership and General Bhardwaj and of course Dr. Ahmed at FICCI side, the expectations have gone really up from the participants. On an average, we have over 400, 300 participants joining, even in these difficult times. And before I kickstart with your permission, the inaugural session, my heart goes out to all the people who are right now in the area which is affected by the cyclone Taukte, especially in Gujarat. I just heard from one of our speakers, Pranab Ghosh from Adani, that there is a power outage, a power cut in Ahmedabad. Extreme speeds of winds been blowing there, and he has some poor connection, so he perhaps could not join us at the moment, but we'll see if he can have his connectivity. He's also a speaker for the day today. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for you to join. We are as we begin the inaugural session. I would just quickly, other than welcoming all the esteemed guests and dignitaries and all the participants, a brief background on what we are here today for. There have been an increase in government support for industrial activities, and rightly so, as private sector plays a very major role in infrastructure development around the world, and especially in our country. Industries and their supporting infrastructure, which Dr. Anil also mentioned, example, industrial zone, ports, roads, power, water supply, sewerage, have long been used to promote industrial competitiveness and trade, create jobs, catalyze investments, and bring technological advancement. However, a range of accidents, say it be natural or human-related disasters, which threatens these industrial activities and the economic benefits they confer. A lack of proper preparedness, sometimes poor industrial infrastructure, and increased frequency and intensity of extreme events, especially extreme weather events, due to climate change all worsen these harmful impacts. Especially after the lockdown in 2020, we have observed accidents happening in industrial units, especially starting from Vizag on the 7th of May last year. To mitigate or minimize these impacts, governments and industries must mainstream disaster risk management and build greater resiliency. Doing so will lower operational risks, attract investments, and promote competitiveness of industries against the increasing impacts of climate change. Keeping disaster resiliency in infrastructure in mind, the Prime Minister of India, Shri Narendra Modi ji, along with his key member of his staff, Shri Dr. P.K. Mishra, who was the PS to PM, they launched the Coalition of Disaster Resilient Infrastructure at the UN Secretary General's Climate Action Summit in New York, US. The fledgling partnership has a secretariat in New Delhi, supported by the UN Office of DRR, the UNDRR, to enable knowledge exchange, technical support, and capacity building. The mission of CDRI is to rapidly expand the development of resilient infrastructure and retrofit existing infrastructures, very important for resilience and to enable a measurable reduction in infrastructure losses. These 3 days of online training program will discuss on finding the right approach towards disaster resilient infrastructure and find effective solutions in the areas of governance and policy, emerging technology, risk identification and estimation, recovery and reconstruction, resilience standards and certification, finance and capacity development. The Industrial Disaster Management Board, the CIDM board, along with the support and able partnership of National Institute of Disaster Management, Ministry of Home Affairs, Government of India is conducting these joint programs with an aim to create disaster resilient infrastructures in the nation, especially in our own country. On that note, now I would request Professor Anil Gupta to make brief opening remarks, followed by a special address by Dr. Ilangovan, then a keynote address and inaugural address by Major General M.K. Bindal, and the special remarks of General Bhardwaj, and some concluding remarks by Dr. Muzaffar Ahmed himself. Over to you, Gupta ji, for your opening remarks.
Thank you, Ruwab. Respected Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal Sahab, Executive Director and IDM. I'm very happy to see him this lockdown period. So this is online platform is the means we can see, and I'm very happy to see his smile. Very happy to see Dr. Ilangovan. Hope everything all right, and he is always looking as composed as I found him 15 years back also. So great to see. Muzaffar Ahmed Saab, who has always been a source of inspiration and support. And I hope General Bhardwaj Saab will also join. So I'm very happy that the team of FICCI jointly with us have taken this initiative on a very important dimension. As when we started this series of NIDM and FICCI jointly on various aspects of resilience across industries and otherwise also on various aspects of disaster management. When we discussed out that when we talk of infrastructure resilience, most of the time focus goes on the urban infrastructure or the primarily what comes to our eyes, what we see. But many of the facilities and services, products and goods that we enjoy in our home are produced in industries, and industries also encompass a very important aspect of infrastructure. And when we talk of industry, again industry is a very broad kind of a term used for a number of sectors. For example, ports are also the part of industry. So, and when we talk of ports, then any kind of impact on this the resilience, infrastructure resilience, or the functionality of port affect a wide range of industries and also the urban systems, their functionality. So the civil infrastructure, public infrastructure, industrial infrastructure, all need to be seen when we really want to promote the disaster resilient infrastructure as a whole. So looking to that, we thought of organizing this 3 days program, and I'm very happy that the team of FICCI in discussion with us could identify excellent resource persons for this program, and a very good number of participants are also here, and I hope this program would be very, very successful. And I'm very happy that ED and IDM sir is here to give a keynote address. His words of wisdom would be a kind of a source of inspiration and guidance for all of us, and also to the participants also. And the lecture by Dr. Elangovan, because he has a very, very vast experience, not only of the safety administration, but also a number of investigations post accidents. So he has analyzed various accidents of various sizes from all sides, technological sides, and also the operability issues, governance issues. So his experience is always very, very important for us. And he belongs to the Ministry of Labor and Employment, which is one of the nodal ministry, which has recently drafted this the safety, environment, and health, occupational health in the workplace bill. That we are just waiting that it will be notified soon, and then I think it will bring a very kind of a paradigm shift in area of workplace safety and industrial resilience as well. So with this, thank you very much, and I'm very keen to listen to ED and IDM sir, Ilamuan ji, and Muzaffar Ahmed sahab ji.
Thank you, Professor Gupta, for with your opening remarks again, complimenting and touching upon some important points what we should be expecting during these 3 days of OTP. Without taking any further time, I would now request Dr. R.K. Langovan, Director General of the Directorate General Factory Advice Service and Labour Institute, DG FASLI, Government of India, please deliver his special address. Before I request him to come up and speak, a brief introduction of Shri Langovan. He's working as the Director General at DG FASLI, Ministry of Labour and Employment. He's a lead safety auditor and has completed iLab India Occupational Safety and Health Modernization Program Trainer Academy, conducted at University of Texas at Arlington. He is an expert faculty in the field of OSH for various renowned institutions and universities, and has been a chairman, member secretary of various committees on OSH formed by the central and state governments. Presently, looking after the Factory Advice Service, FAS division at DG FASLI, dealing with regulatory aspects of the Factories Act 1948, and functioning as the chairman of the Academic Council of AFIH course conducted by DG FASLI. On that note, I would request Mr. Elangovan, Dr. Elangovan, to please deliver a special address.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Rubab Sood, for a very brief introduction. Respected Major General M.K. Bindaji, ED, NIDM, Dr. Anil Gupta, and Lieutenant General Bharadwaj, who is expected to join, and dear delegates and members and office bearers of FICCI. In fact, it's really a great effort jointly done by NIDM and FICCI to host this program on resilience and industrial infrastructure. I had happened to be in the middle of Professor Anil Gupta's presentation, and in fact, all of us know it's a fairly new concept. Like we started with safety, we started with risk management, then we came to on-site, off-site emergency planning. Then we moved on to disaster management planning. Now, this is another step in terms of resilience in industrial infrastructure. Even though the concept-wise it's quite new, but this concept is well practiced, particularly in the IT and ITES industry, in terms of business continuity planning. The sense that the industry which is having so much relevance and they cannot afford to be off the track or off the scene, because of an incident or emergency or a disaster, then they always look into a business continuity planning, which is a standard requirement when it comes to IT and ITS industries. By looking at the model, all of us can understand its focus is more into putting it back into operation at the earliest without giving a sufficient time or gap. In fact, it's something like this: a particular facility goes out, becomes non-functional. Within a fraction of a second, the other facility takes on. And probably the consumer or the end user will not be even aware that there is some disruption in the one facility and the other backup facility has taken care of by itself. It is, by the way, it's a kind of a pre-planning, determination, and a kind of foreseeing such scenarios and try to make a backup arrangement. But when it comes to industries, it's a very complex job. As Professor Anil Gupta has said, industries are located, spread up in different nook and corners of the country. There are industries which are in cluster, which are in isolation, and the hazards, risks prevailing in these industries vary from one industry to another industry. The societal awareness or the societal knowledge on these hazards and risks, even though they are part of the regulatory framework, that they should be made aware, sensitized on the risk and the corresponding procedures, the overall sensitization or the knowledge level or awareness prevails among the society at large surrounding these plants. This is a biggest issue. Very important point is when we talk about resilience in industrial infrastructure, not only the guidelines, not only the procedures, we need to go for a robust regulatory framework. Why I would like to mention is that unless we have a complete regulatory framework with guideline documents, code of practices, and compliance becomes much difficult. It's a need. There's a need for us to take these industries to the next level in terms of thinking towards resilience. So you have to forecast and you have to predict and you have to be prepared, and you should also have plans in your hand to see that your operations starts back after an emergency or a disaster within possibly least point of time. And if you look in this entire concept, this concept cannot be viewed in isolation. If we want to say only industries do that, then probably we may not be able to achieve the target. I would always believe that this is not possible unless we involve the complete stakeholders. It's like the capacity building measure should be implemented for all the stakeholders, not only the industry. The engagement of employees, employee engagement, and the ability of the systems. In fact, a very important point is that when we are also talking about that when we are now currently in the pandemic situation, COVID-19, we have come across in our own experience, our existing safety, health management systems, risk management systems are reviewed in terms of the present prevailing condition. Same way, when we talk about resilience in industrial infrastructure, an ability to bounce back after the emergency within a possible very short time, they need multiple components. I would say the major component would be we need to have a regulatory framework. There should be a kind of an institutional framework who can support the systems. We need to sensitize the people. We need to integrate resilience in terms of operation, maintenance, and systems that are adopted in the workplaces. And we need to have engagement of stakeholders or community at large. And we should also look in terms of kind of guiding organizations like NADM and NDMA and various organizations who can help the industries to plan for resilience, to work towards resilience, and also give them their technology and knowledge, know-how. And finally, we should also think in terms of investment, financial backup. It's also equally important when we talk about resilience. I think with this a small note, I once again thank Vicky Canadian for inviting me to be part of the inaugural function. I'm cut shorting my speech because there will be a presentation. Of course, Dr. Anil has already spoken at length, so my presentation will be following. Thank you once again for your patient hearing and invitation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Langavan, for your very special remarks. And I think you've emphasized on technology and how and ample amount of financial backing to enhance and build better resilience in the industries. And I think this is where organizations, I think with like NIDM and NDMA always had focus on, and now CDRI also coming into the picture. I think the regulations would be even more pertinent, more stronger, and more relevant from building resilient infrastructure point of view in times to come. And that's what we all are hoping for. Thank you so much, Dr. Langavan, for your address. Now it's time for me to request Major General M.K. Bindal, Executive Director, National Institute of Disaster Management, Ministry of Home Affairs, Government of India, for his keynote and I would say the inaugural address, ideally. Thank you so much, General Bindal, for being with us. We missed you in last few, initiatives, online initiatives, but we are so happy that you are back. You're a COVID survivor. You've been a warrior throughout, and it wasn't the same without you. But now with you back with us, I think we're really very happy. Thank you so much. I'll just quickly, although you need no introduction, but I'll, for the benefit of all the participants.
No, not required. Not required. Just I'll start off. I'm Executive Director, National Institute of Disaster Management. Can you hear me, Rubab?
Sir, yes, loud and clear, sir. Yes,
okay.
Please.
First of all, heartiest congratulations to FICCI and NIDM under the leadership of Jal Bharadwaj, Rubab, and Professor Anil Gupta, who have brought this program together. And I'm so happy that I remember having discussed with first Sanjeev and then Rubab and then Jal Bharadwaj about last year, somewhere in June, that we need to start training on disaster management for the industry, because that is a subject which is not being talked about, and generally online emergency response plan is the limit of disaster management for industry. And that time we started this whole process and see where we have come, because FICCI understood the importance of the subject, and thereafter a number of programs have been done related to industries, related to everything to do with occupational and safety hazards. And today we have a much more, I'll say, risk-informed industrial people in the industries who are now taking decisions in which disaster management is also forming part of it. So for that, we are very thankful, and I'll say we should be thankful that this particular partnership is paving the way for the industries to become more resilient, the word which Professor Anil Gupta was explaining so beautifully in the morning. Now I'll speak something about this topic. The new generation of infrastructure will be smarter, more efficient, but with performances also comes vulnerability. So future proofing civil infrastructure projects is one of the biggest challenges facing the industry. Safe, secure, resilient infrastructure is lifeline of the future. It is a differentiator between successful and struggling economies and societies. So it will not be surprising that much hope and expectation is resting on this new era of development. Just by adding capacity is not enough. It has to be durable. It has to be future-proof. The infrastructure of tomorrow must cope with, adapt to, a complex, extensive, evolving mix of hazards, risks, and threats. So as a result, resilience must now be an essential component of every project across its entire life cycle, integrated from the planning and design phase, and not just added on as a last minute feature. So all disasters are said to follow a cyclical pattern referred to as the disaster cycle. The cycle is an overall view of stages within a continued loop of prevention, mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. So disaster preparedness is one of the stages of the disaster management cycle, which is guided in a proper manner, provides adequate protection to the communities. So it involves the identification of potential hazards and vulnerabilities through risk assessments, forecast developments, warning systems, modeling, training for a number of disaster scenarios, creating scenarios with different hazards at different magnitudes, then development of insurance infrastructure and growth of an intelligent community. The protection of these systems and assets, and within the energy sector especially, the safeguarding of oil and gas infra from any and all internal and external threats should become top priority. In fact, threats to geopolitical and economic stability that needs to be considered and prepared to include tectonic activities, climate change, nuclear energy, terrorism, war, and many other such things. In petroleum industry, for example, the disaster management plan, it will ensure safety of life, protection of environment, protection of installation, restoration of the production, and salvage operations in the same order of priorities. So oil and gas fires are more difficult to extinguish than regular fires due to the enormous continuous fuel supply to the fire. So oil or gas fires, it can be the result of human actions such as accidents, arsons, natural events such as lightning. So in case of such fires, it is important that uh, we prepare for that. And for an effective implementation of the disaster management plan, it should be widely circulated and trained through rehearsals, drills, mock drills, and continuously keep getting repeated. So the objective is to make use of the combined resources of the industrial infrastructure and the outside services. What's more is that the civil infrastructure must also withstand the escalating physical threats of terrorism, like what we are seeing in Gaza area now, and climate change. And what we saw in Beirut when those drums went off, there was a blast next to the port. For these combined reasons, ensuring the resilience of civil infrastructure is one of the biggest challenges facing the industry today. Extreme weather events and natural disasters are two of the most likely and impactful risks which have been identified in the World Economic Forum 2017 Global Risks Report. In case of emergency, on-site and off-site plans following disaster management plan will immediately come into force. Disaster management organizations will assume control and responsibility in case of any emergency situation. Similarly, various coordinators such as safety coordinators, medical, security, and welfare and public relation coordinators should be assigned for effective implementation of on-site and off-site disaster management plan. In addition, the role of emergency control room becomes very important in such cases. If the situation is out of control of the area around the well and evacuated, the decision in this regard is taken by the appropriate authorities. There are two classes of threat which are very worrying, the physical and the digital, and they're rapidly converging, and this was also referred to by the previous speakers also. So in the era of smart cities, wide-scale adoption of the Internet of Things and cloud technology all offer significant advantages across the built environment, from increasing communicability, maintenance, monitoring, to reducing traffic congestion. Yet, this increased digital access also makes infrastructure assets more vulnerable. in recent high-profile and large-scale cyber attacks. We saw disrupted power supplies, governments and departments and banks in Ukraine, along with the US, UK, Russia, Australia, and others getting disrupted. It is reported that in Ukraine, hackers were able to infiltrate several of the country's power distribution center, leaving about 250,000 residents without electricity for some time. So these attacks have the potential to become even more destructive. For example, the Center for Strategic and International Studies believes that North Korea is building its cyber resources and is capable of conducting and damaging disruptive cyber attacks. Conversely, physical threats, such as those resulting from climate change, can also pave the way for digital disruption. I'm talking about this digital disruption a little bit more because this is the most difficult to achieve. Resilience to that is the most difficult to achieve, and it is not a one-time effort. It is every second effort. Every second we have to be ahead of the curve. So there is a far greater symbiosis between the digital and the physical worlds, which most people have started realizing. So effects of natural disaster that impact critical infrastructure such as power, water, wastewater, and communication, they rely on this digital backbone. Any risk manager, he'll confirm that risk cannot be eliminated altogether. However, we believe that infrastructure owners and service providers, both public and private, can become better at planning and mitigating threats, including those which are yet unknown. The goal should be to manage risk effectively, understand which risks at what level should be mitigated or transferred, or even accept some risk up to a certain level. So what should the infrastructure organization do to prepare to manage these risks effectively? So if I have to list out a few, I'll say first is start early. For maximum impact, a resilience strategy must be introduced as early as possible in the lifespan of an asset. This may link back to the industry's binary view of the physical and digital world. We still see examples such as during the construction of an airport building or a rail track, when plans for introducing the IT and security systems are started after the physical asset has been built. So the infrastructure owners, the goal must be to build in resilience planning as early as possible. The sooner a protection framework is implemented, the more cost efficient and effective it becomes. The second issue is understand the risk. Having early stage conversation about risk management makes it easier for an organization to customize a resilience strategy. This means knowing which assets it wants to protect, as well as more importantly, understanding the function of those assets and the potential cost of losing or devolving that particular function. Then next step I will say is to prioritize, to optimize the resources. It is impossible to eliminate risk completely. That is a given fact. So if the assets are aging, our infrastructure owner will need to select where it wants to focus its resiliency investment. Consider what cost benefit analysis was talked about by Professor Anil Gupta in the beginning. Consider where most effort and resources need to be focused. And in addition to the functionality, the service life of the asset, feasibility of replacing it must be considered. The time of and cost of replacing a facility is tremendous. So a significant investment is required. By contrast, a data center with the hardware assets that are replaced every 2 years will have less at risk, as its long-term asset is only the building that houses the equipment. Then next step, I will say accept, mitigate, or transfer the risk. While new vulnerability is constantly evolving, infrastructure owners must decide how to manage the many risks they have. The first option is to accept the risk, manage it internally with the resources available. Second option is mitigating risk as new threats emerge by adapting or retrofitting an asset. The goal is to restore functionality, either fully or partially, in the fastest time. The third approach is to transfer the risk. For example, by creating a backup facility that can quickly take on the function of the original case, which is not possible in every case. But it is important to understand where that risk is transferred in order to ensure it is managed effectively. And next step I'll say will be enhance. Building infrastructure resilience cannot be a one-time investment. Just as being healthy requires a certain lifestyle, resilience demands a new way of operating. So having put a strategy in place, it is essential that the protection plan is revisited and updated regularly. Continuous risk mitigation must be the goal. The threats are constantly evolving. Business changes, government changes, environmental changes, compliance increases, technology is exploding. It is crucial to stay engaged and agile and always stay ahead of the curve. Investing in infrastructure resilience can be expensive and time-intensive process, but it is a necessary one. Early planning not only mitigates the impact of disruption, it also creates interesting net benefits. So looking at the bigger picture, infrastructure-focused climate change initiatives have potential to offer positive effects for the wider global economy while generating market advantages and goodwill with, with customers, employers, and investors. And we have to learn the recent lessons. Now today, cyclone Totke has moved along the coast of the entire Arabian Sea, causing so much of havoc. But I'll just give a small example where we can learn a lesson and start building up. There, many trees were uprooted, but in many areas there were many trees which withstood the wind speed of 150 plus, 180 plus, and they did not get uprooted. So this is the right time to identify, seeing the soil conditions, which are these trees which did not get uprooted. And that is what we should start planting and make a buffer wall of green nature-based solution around our industries, around the coastline, around every, so that at least like mangroves save us, these trees will save us instead of getting uprooted by planting trees which cannot stand, because this floods, cyclonic storms is a thing which will keep coming. It's a recurring cycle. So the lessons learned has to be done in real time at a very fast scale so that they can be implemented. And so if India wants to create an impactful response to the crisis, we need to pull in all our resources, maybe even look at reallocation of budgets. So extraordinary situations such as these requires extraordinary responses. So with this, I've tried to give a reason as to why this is important and why this particular 3-day program on such an important topic will help our participants learn a lot and maybe imbibe something out of that in their own organization. And if 5% of them start doing something about it, I think it will be a great start. And I once again congratulate everyone. I thank Dr. Ilangovan for his opening address. I thank Dr. Muzaffar Ahmed for being here, and General Bharadwaj, who's yet to join. And I thank Dr. Anil Gupta and Rubab Sood for organizing such a program. And I wish this 3 days program all the very best. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, General Bindal, for your very encouraging and very visionary remarks. I think this is something I have no, I don't feel shy saying that over and over again, that this is what we were missing. This element was missing in a few last conferences, last few OTPs. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I think in very appropriate detail, you've mentioned the relevance, and I think taking a cue from what Dr. Ilangovan and Dr. Professor Gupta also mentioned, I think it's time to develop resilience infrastructures, and I think the intervention has to be at the right time. What you said, the planning, at the very planning process, this needs to be embedded so that we save cost, we save it is more economically feasible, and even will down the line have a better impact on humans also, because we build safer habitats, and I think that is what is important. So from the very planning stage, resilience has to be a word which we need to keep in mind at all times. Thank you so much, Jan Bindal, for your very visionary remarks, and I think we'll have more of you in all our OTPs coming forward. Thank you so much, sir. Please take care of yourself. Stay healthy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
On that note, I would move on to the concluding remarks and the vote of thanks. And we have our very eminent former member, National Disaster Management Authority, and member of FICCI CID board, Dr. Muzaffar Ahmed. Thus, I would request Dr. Ahmed to deliver the concluding remarks, a brief introduction of Dr. Ahmed. He is the former member of NDMA, Government of India, with Minister of State status. While he was the member, highly experienced, he has looked after industrial disaster management, mitigation, earthquake, and other important subjects at national level. Dr. Ahmed has been instrumental in formulation of more than 8 national guidelines, a proud recipient of Dr. B.C. Roy National Award by the Honorable President of India. Dr. has written more than 6 books on disaster management itself, and he has represented India at many national and international forums. Dr. Ahmed, thank you so much for joining us, sir. Over to you for your concluding remarks and your vote of thanks, Dr. Ahmed.
Thank you, Rubab. Respected Alango, DG Faste, Professor Anil Gupta, and must first compliment you, Professor Gupta, training program on resilient industrial infrastructure is a very important thing. Bindal has elaborated it so well, and before that, Professor Gupta and Dr. Ilango explained. We have seen many industrial disasters, and we have regulatory mechanism in our country, especially after Bhopal gas tragedy. Number of initiatives were taken by Government of India to make our industry safe. Although we had under the Factories Act the system of monitoring by Chief Inspector of Factories, and taken even by the group of ministers which was constituted for Bhopal restoration and rehabilitation of the people. You see, what has that it is a preparedness which is important, so that the disaster about the the present day threat of cyber attacks, terrorism. All these threats are going to be there for industries as well. Besides the natural disasters we have been getting now very frequently, although our country has developed a very good system of early warning and it gives us time to evacuate people. But for industries also, especially the industries in coastal areas of Gujarat and Vapi and all important even in Maharashtra, it is essential that we prepare our industries and we have on-site plans and off-site plans which need not to be on paper alone, but also need to be simulated and put into for practice by way of mock drills. I would like to say that this training program, which has been is going to not only improve and build the capacity of various participants who have come from various parts of the country, but is going to be helpful in propagating whatever they will learn from this training course. We have excellent resource persons which under the under aegis of General Bhardwaj and also under General Bindal, Professor Anil Gupta and Rubab, you have framed the program, for which I must compliment you both for organizing these training programs. And I must mention the work done by Rubab and your team, Akhil, Manik, Varun Sharma, and similarly staff of NIDM under the able leadership of General Bindal. I'm sure these training courses in future with the, we had large number of training courses since last 1 year, and a number of participants were got benefited with this. I am sure this, which today's training course on resilient infrastructure is again going to be very helpful. With this, I wish you all the best, and I wish the participants good health. And I would like to say that stay safe and take precautions. There's government of India in SOPs, follow SOPs for COVID, use masks, physical distance, even after vaccination, you need to use masks, distance, and good hygiene. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ahmed, for your always so very encouraging remarks, and and that's very important vote of thanks. I think you've been one of the reasons why we've been able to keep the momentum going of organizing. Most of the resource persons are good contacts of yours. I think a lot of effort and guidance, your guidance, and of course efforts from the team down below. Myself. Mainak, Akhil, Varun, all of them, and then Harshit from NIDM under Professor Gupta. I think the effort are the seeds which were sown last year, which also Major General Bindal mentioned. I think they are reaping fruits, and something which is benefiting, rightly he said, the people at large, all stakeholders across the country, and even outside, beyond the borders. Thank you so much, Dr. Ahmed, for sparing time and being with us. I think on that note, we can conclude the inaugural session, Professor Gupta. Yes, right. Thank you so much again, General Bindal, for your time, your effort, and your blessings. Thank you so much. And we will now continue with Dr. Ilangovan, who would be giving a detailed presentation, and we are all looking forward.
Thank you. I'll take leave.
Right, sir. Thank you so much. Please, sir.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Doctor.
So over to you, Dr. Langovan. I would not take into any more time of yours because people are really, really looking forward to your presentation. I also want to share with you that the speaker, Mr. Pranav Ghosh from Adani, who was to speak after you, because he's in Ahmedabad and the situation there is not very well. There are power cuts, so he is, sought excuse for today. He would be joining us tomorrow, Dr. Gupta. He said he will be joining us tomorrow for the presentation, so we can perhaps stretch tomorrow's session a bit. But today we'll have Mr. Dr. Ilangovan. The stage is all yours, sir, and we all are looking forward to your presentation. Over to you, sir. You are on mute, Dr. Ilangovan, but we can see your screen now. Yes. You could unmute yourself.
Now I think I'm audible.
Yes, you are audible. Yes. Right, sir.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I will take another 30 minutes because our scheduled time is 4:30. I'll try to compress the presentation
Please.
to the extent possible. First, again, I wish you a very good evening, and it's a kind of presentation which is a blend of two things. One is the basic concept, and what is my personal visualization when it comes to industries and resilience. So the first slide regarding DG Fastly, I don't want to go into it. Only I wanted to answer one point which was touched by Dr. Gupta, Anil Gupta. Basically, the Ministry of Labour has already brought 4 national codes on labour codes, amalgamating or substituting 44 legislations. And the Code on Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions 2020 has already been passed by the Honorable Parliaments and has been assented by the President, and was also published in the official Gazette. And presently, the government is working on making rules and regulations in this regard. So when we talk about resilience, as I gave my input in the inaugural function, this is something quite new, and we need to develop a kind of expertise. We need to involve people. And I would always say, when we talk about resilience, we should also think about integrating the resilience with the systems what we adopt in industry. Our emergency planning, particularly in the industries, and the disaster management planning should be considered as the starting point. That should be linked with the resilience mechanism that is expected to be introduced in the industries. And as we know, when we talk in terms of disasters and emergency, in terms of non-availability of resources, the resilience in the industrial infrastructure also requires resources. In fact, nothing can happen without investment or resources, both in terms of money, men, of course, machine, and other facilities. So we need to look in terms of resources availability and proximity to the industrial sectors or industry as it is, and how. And we should also have a mechanism to predict the need for such resources. And we know when we talk about resilience, the very important point is, even though there are two types of disasters what we have in factories, the natural disasters also plays a vital role or becomes an initiating point in creating, technical errors or technical deviations in workplaces. In fact, if you have a flood in a natural disaster, then that flood can create a scenario or a hazard or a risk where a pipeline can fail, or a system can be overturned, or a storage can shear, or a escape of a hazardous chemical can happen. So when we talk in terms of industrial infrastructure, what we are trying to say is that the natural resources are also acting as an initiating point for the occurrence of the technical or technological errors, which may result in disasters. Then, when we talk about the resilience, I thought it is very important. Of course, Dr. Anil Gupta also spoke on these aspects. Very important point is it is the capacity of the system, ability of a system, community or society. In fact, we talk about three things here: the system, industry, and the community at large, the society, exposed to hazard to resist, absorb, accommodate, and recover. So it has four components. They have to resist the hazard to the hazards, and they should also in a position to absorb the hazards, accommodate them, and bounce back, recover from the effects of the hazard in a timely manner. Very important point in resilience is how quick you can able to do it. That's the important aspect. And how efficient you are in coming back to normalcy, and including your preservation, restoration of essential basic structures and functions. So, to put it in a simple manner, it is a kind of a capacity or a capability to respond to a disaster and ability to bounce back. How fast, how swift you are, how the systems are so strategy that you can bounce back to normalcy soon after occurrence of the disaster. And basically, we need to understand the industries need to be functioning and sustainable. This is another important issue. When they are functioning and sustainable, then the resilience is very faster, because functioning organizations alone can be having more resilience than non-functioning organizations. We look more or less the resilience in terms of the disaster reduction, in terms of the risk management, in terms of safety and health management, in terms of overall hazard management in a workplace. And the resources is an important issue. The resource allocation within the organization or by the stakeholders are equally important when we talk about the resilience. The resource in terms of having specific agencies or institutions or sustainable, we can also talk about the disaster resilient measures. and then disseminating the information. So we need to have resources for completely managing the resilience. And when we come to resilience, it's more or less closely connected to risk there, because when we talk about risk, we talk in terms of hazard. Hazard means when the occurrence of the hazard in terms of probability of occurrence and consequence. The same way, the resilience depends on the risk. If the risk is very high, the resilience will be tough, that could delay, that it requires a lot of resources and input to come back to normalcy after occurrence of a disaster. So in terms of resilience, the risk minimization, the risk reduction, keeping very bare minimum risk in a workplace will be an ideal thought to ensure a better resilience in the workplaces. And it is also, perceived as a process of reconciling humanitarian response to disaster with the longer term development. None of the, your resilience measures or the response measures can be successful without involving the human. And the human include your own workforce and technical, non-technical, skilled, semi-skilled, and the community who is living at large. We have to involve them. Engaging them towards resilience is the biggest challenge for any industry to cope up with. And of course, we need to understand and recognizing the interdependence between biophysical and socio-economic systems. Very important point when we talk about resilience, we need to look into the integrity of the multiple systems that surrounding an industrial infrastructure. And of course, when we talk about resilience, we must talk in terms of both physical substances as well as societal systems, because you cannot view an industrial enterprise in isolation, because anything happens, a disaster happens, an emergency happens, could be on-site or off-site, the consequences are either going to affect the people, the workers inside the industry, or if it is offsite, then it's going to cross the boundary and it is going to affect the society at large. So we need to look physical system and societal system as the as two components of the resilience when it comes to industrial infrastructure. And we need the resilience system should be robust in the same, which can able to absorb the shock and which are capable of delivering the result despite the impact of such disaster. And we should also have a redundancy. When we talk about resilience, there cannot be a single solution. There cannot be a single strategy. There need to be multiple strategies, alternate options, choices, and substitutions. And the best or optimal one will be taken up during a resilience. And we need to be resourceful in terms of mobilizing the resources and making it available in case of emergency. Rapidity, the swiftness is a very important issue. If you are swift enough, the facilities, the system should be put in place much faster, and the rapidity that decides the successful of any resilience systems. When we talk about this, fact was talked by earlier speaker also. When we talk about attribute, we talk in terms of functionality as well as interdependence. When we talk about the hazards, we have one hazard. This is one is routine hazards, what we expect from a workplace and in the industry, which are largely minor in nature. They may not be having a big impact, but maybe localized with the less consequences. That's why we call them as the routine hazards with low risk, I would say. And that could be expected. It's a kind of a medium risk kind of thing. For example, I have a storage tank, and there is every possibility that the level gauge may fail, and there could be a little spillage or slop over, and there could be accumulation of chemical within the dike area, and understanding it to be flammable. Then you can get the vapor cloud, and then kind of a fire or explosion. They're all expected because of the design consideration. Then the third condition is very important. It's a kind of extreme hazard. It's a high risk, I would say, which is not expected under normal circumstances. The cases like Bhopal, like LG polymers, then the Indian oil fire, and there are so many accidents, oxygen explosion that occurred in Visakhapatnam. There are so many accident cases. We come across these extreme systems where the risk in terms of the consequence, in terms of the effect, has become very huge, and the demand or the resilience is questioned to a larger extent because the system may not be able to recover so fastly when the level of asset becomes extreme. And we also look in terms of resilience, in terms of time basis. This is a very important issue. As I mentioned earlier also, when we talk about IT industries, they come back to operation within fraction of second. Even the end user may not know that there is some disturbance in the facility and a parallel facility has come into the system. So, but where in case of industries, in case of manufacturing industries, in case of any industry, such type of getting back into normalcy within a fraction of second is highly remote. It's highly difficult. But at the same time, within the permissible limit, doing everything to see that the resilience is achieved within a short time is the need of the hour. When we talk about the community, which is, as I told you, very important, when we talk about the industrial infrastructure in terms of resilience, we need to look the community in terms of the geographical boundary and government structure. In fact, all of us know we will not be able to succeed in offsite emergency plan without the positive support of the regulatory authorities, district authorities, particularly police, revenue, hospital, transport, pollution, factory inspector, and so on. But the community also includes the governmental structure, institutions, and their ability to deliver the requirement is also an important attribute when it comes to resilience management. And we should also look in terms of the industrial infrastructure. If they are in isolation or the surrounding villages, surrounding towns, population, academic institutions, all these things are part of your we should be resilience plan. As we see, all these things are part of our emergency planning. Same way, the resilience plan also should talk about this. When it comes to disaster resilience, it is the ability to prepare and adapt to changing conditions and withstand and recover rapidly from disruption arising out of disaster. Here, the emphasis is not only on mitigating the risk. We are not only concerned about mitigating, we are also bothered about implementing measures ensure that the community recovers to normal, near normal function, and in a reasonable time. It's not that the industry alone comes to normalcy. We also look for the community to come back to normalcy within a very possible shortest time. I come to the discussion on the industrial infrastructure. When we want to build a resilient infrastructure, we need communities to be involved. They need to support the system. There should be engagement. And we should also have a capacity building systems for the community. Innovation is very important. In fact, when we talk about resilience, it's a kind of more of innovation, imagination, kind of a technical research and development. We need to have innovation in terms of how we can put back into normalcy, considering the different type of risk or assets that may persist in the workplace. And promoting partnership, as I told you, it's like the involvement of all the stakeholders. We need to promote the partnership and enable larger projects, because the advantage here is when we have a large project, the large projects also have a component of resilience, provided the same is put into the system. We need to maintain flexibility in terms of operation, because flexibility is the one which facilitates resilience in a better manner. For example, I use a material A, and if the material A is not available, B can be used, C can be used. Such kind of flexibility should be built in with the system, so that there is no need for the system to wait for the same thing, or the flexibility will help in making it returning back to normalcy at the earliest time. And we also have to have consistency in terms of building resilience. The measures should be consistent and it should not be varying. The targets could be, we need to develop a quality, reliable, sustainable and resilient infrastructure. This is very important. And we can also have regional and trans-border infrastructure. We can look in terms of regional infrastructure, local infrastructure, and a district infrastructure, as well as trans-border infrastructure to support economic development and well-being. And focus should be on affordability and equitability. It's very important. It should be affordable, and this resilience should be accessible to everyone. That's very important. And we need to upgrade the infrastructure. Retrofit industry, this is a very important issue. When you talk about resilience, retrofitting the industry is plays a very vital component, and they need to be sustainable. And of course, increased resource use efficiency, a greater use of technology and sound technology and industry processes. We should also facilitate sustainable and resilient infrastructure development through enhanced financial, technological, and technical support. We need to look in terms of resilience with the financial, technological, and technical support. And if you see, any resilient system cannot succeed without the involvement of the community. Community includes your citizens, industry, business, government altogether, and we look into functional requirements like energy, transportation, communication, water, power, structures, all those things. When we come to resilience and disaster, disaster risk reduction, you can find here. Now we need to have equity, very important. There should be equity among the concerned factors towards disaster risk reduction. And risk reduction cannot happen without the risk knowledge. And of course, the risk knowledge, we should have to consider political, cultural, social, environmental, human, economic, physical, and institutional framework. See, all these things shall work together towards risk reduction by moving towards risk knowledge and sensitization of the concerned stakeholder. The important takeaway in this Sunday framework, we need to understand the risk in all its dimensions. Not that we understand risk in terms of prevention, in terms of control, in terms of linking it to other aspects. We need to look in terms of its all dimensions, because understanding the risk in all dimensions will help us to move towards a better resilience. And we should also shift our focus from managing the disaster to managing the risk, because managing a disaster is something which is happening at the extreme end. We need to go into the causative factor, hazard and risk. So managing risk will be a better initiative, which will be an underlying factor when we talk about resilience. If you are able to manage the risk, reduce the risk to the minimal, the resilient system also will be very simpler, and the ability to bounce back to normalcy within a short framework is quite feasible. Third important point is whole of society approach. So we need to involve the complete society. We shouldn't talk in terms of fragments of the society. We need to involve the whole society, every stakeholder and every system into account. Then only the resilience measures can be of better use. And if you see the framework, what you find in terms of resilience, if you have a system or a process, an industry, and that industry can be subjected to shock or stresses. There can be shock, there can be risk, there can be an accident, and because of it, you can have exposure, sensitivity, adaptive capacity, and so on. Very important point is the reaction to the disturbance. So any resilience measures, we always talk in terms of reaction disturbance, in terms of bouncing back to normalcy, bouncing back to better. And there is also possibility. It is not a question that all the risk scenarios can be brought back. But when the risk becomes extreme, it is beyond control. And if the entire facility or the system are going to be completely washed out or burnt into ashes, the question of coming back to normalcy is altogether establishing a new system. So we need to look in terms of the context, the industrial framework, and the disturbances in terms of hazards and risks. And the capacity is very important. We have a very big role to play in terms of capacity. You reduce the exposure, make it less sensitive, and you will also create the capacity to adapt to the requirement. And of course, the dealing with the disturbance in terms of assets and risk is part of the operation process where we try to go for the risk reduction. Now you see, there are so many dangers which can happen to a plant or an industry, and all of resilience systems will be considering these impacts or these initiating events or these errors and deviations that may happen at a workplace. Very important point when it comes to resilience in industrial infrastructure, we should not forget the domino cascading effect. It's like not only we are considering a risk or hazard in a particular industry or a cluster of industry, we should also consider the effect of this on the other industries and what kind of resilience systems we need to put into place to take care of the domino cascading effects. We have, basically when we talk about hazard and risk in industries in industrial infrastructure, having considered low risk, medium risk, and high risk, even the MSH rules 1989 or the major hazard control rules, all those rules always consider the fire, explosion, toxic release as three major hazards which can have a big impact in the industry as it is. And of course, the same way, the resilience in terms of the industrial process, we should talk in terms of toxicity and flammability and explosivity of the substance. So we understand them in terms of the effects and consequences and the seriousness of such effects and how these resilience systems can be put into place. So when we talk about risk, as I told you, we assess the vulnerability and also understand the thresholds in terms of maybe threshold limit value or in terms of permissible limits of exposure and so on. And we also understand the capacity, adaptive capacity of an organization and decision maker. Very important in a disaster is the decision making. We have come across one of the industry, fertilizer industry, when there was a big fire accident. All these team leaders, team members prepared on the on-site emergency plan. They ran away from the scenario. Despite to train and do a lot of capacity building measures, the choice is with the stakeholders, employees to come forward and to take the risk reduction or control measures. Ultimately, it's on record. I will be surprised. The non-trained people went forward and took care of the risk management. So basically, we need to have the decision making. In fact, in many cases, to really attack the risk or to move away, it's an important decision for any risk management system in an industry. And we should also very easily, we can appreciate that risk should be integrated with the entire decision-making process, because if you cannot able to integrate risk in the ongoing decision-making process, then it is difficult to get a better resilience in the infrastructure. And this kind of categorization can also be thought about in terms of the kind of resilience or the output that's happening after a disaster. So you can categorize the industries, whether it is safe and operational, or safe and usable during repair, and safe and not usable, unsafe so that it is partial and complete collapse. So we can categorize the performance standards, and based on the performance standards, we can create resilience measures. And we can also look in terms of performance standard. How are you able to return? In fact, this is an important issue. Whenever we talk about resilience, we should always talk in terms of going back to normalcy. When are you bouncing back to normalcy? How are you going to establish a normal working system? Then we can say within days I can have 100% resuming the operation. Or somebody says within a month, or somebody says within years. So such categorization will also help us in mobilizing the resources and facilities and infrastructure to make the system meaningful. In fact, there was also discussion, we should integrate disaster, emergency, and resilience system in terms of safety continue. In fact, safety is the overall philosophical concept which takes care of the management of hazards and risk. And we need to have safety as a basic component in an industrial establishment in terms of prevention, preparedness, and response. And you have multiple options when it comes to resilience, but all these options have to be judiciously used and their integrating elements should be well knitted. Otherwise, we cannot have a better resilient system. We need in terms of intervention, recondition, reconstruction. Of course, we also on the other side, we have prevention, preparation. This is something like before the occurrence of, it's a pre-disaster and post-disaster. And resilience should talk in terms of both the sides to see that we have a better resilience in industrial infrastructure. And when we talk about industrial infrastructure resilience, we need to look into terms of scientific validated mitigation measures. It's not that we try to say something, but it should be scientific, it should be validated. We talk in terms of power supply, transport services, health services, restart procedures. It's very important. When we had the striding release or when the first lockdown was lifted, when the industries were about to start, you would have seen a lot of chemical accidents happened in the chemical industries. Then the problem with the restart procedures and then, like a pre-start safety review, PSSR, and other procedures to see that the systems are in place before restarting. Same way, in resilience, we should also talk in terms of restart procedures and human resource, very important issue. How to, it's a very difficult to manage human resource, their skill levels and their ability to contribute, making them more capacity building measures should be involved. Very important point is your supply chain management. This was also talked to a certain extent. Your suppliers, vendors, all these people also should be resilient enough. Otherwise, industry alone cannot be resilient. We need to conform into standards. The focus should be on developing an adherence to standards and code of practices, particularly on resilience. This I've already spoken because we are running short of time. So basically, this is a basic document, I would say, which is being continued, which is being practiced and worked for a longer time in the IT and IT's industry in terms of resilience by having a business continuity planning. It gives a big input or it gives a lesson in bringing the same concept in the industries. Only thing is, if bringing resilience or business continuity in an industry may not be so simple like an IT or IT's industry, because here the situation is little complex, multiple stakeholders are involved, but still resilience measures can be aligned with the business continuity planning system. Again, when we come to priorities, when it comes to priorities in terms of resilience, we need to create culture. This is basically a very important issue. Now, culture is the overall characteristics of the complete mass. When we talk about safety culture, we talk in terms of values, belief, attributes in terms of safety. The same way, creating culture of resilience, involving everyone in the stakeholder, and everybody is having the same perception on resilience I would say, this is the ultimate goal. Probably we should think about it. And the second level priority, much lesser than this, is to improve the understanding on the risk, and the decision making is risk based. In fact, very important. Any decision should be risk based, risk informed decision making. And then the other priority could be we reduce the risk, minimize the risk, and making it much simpler so that resilience systems are much easier to do. Fourth priority is strengthen the resilience in terms of planning as well as adaptation. So there can be multiple measures in terms of protection, upgrading, and resilience in infrastructure. We need to look in terms of electricity, water, transport, and critical vulnerabilities. We should look into it. And impact of loss of services, infrastructure failure, economic losses should also be well predicted in advance. And the common thing which we find, earthquakes or disasters, accidents, emergencies in a bigger chemical plants, these can create, high vulnerability. They are highly vulnerable. Of course, the constructing the building and structure in line with the standards and codes of practice, NBC and so on, can have big impact or big impact in terms of having better resilience in workplaces. And to be very honestly speaking, resilience, we should not talk in terms of in terms of isolation. If you look industrial infrastructure resilience in isolation, then it will be a futile effort. We need to look in terms of government involvement, district and regional district authorities, community involvement, and business organization. Like in our emergency planning, we have mutual aids, so business and organization involvement, and the community at large. Having said that, we need to also see that the sustainability is an important issue. We need to sustain. It's very difficult because all's easy to say, but when it comes to reality, considering the change in people, the organization memory, cultural changes, and all those things, we need to see that these systems should be sustainable, and they should be managed through continuous innovation and the systemic change such that the sustainability is not compromised. In fact, we should always have it's not like a single straight line. We need to have the bandwidth which the whole sustainability should sustain. And we should also create set of conditions and a favorable atmosphere to see that, and the continual efforts are very much required to make the systems sustainable. And coming to, I will come to the integration part. Very important is we need, as I told you, we can't look this in isolation. The industrial resilience to be integrated with the national resilience. We should also have individual cluster-oriented resilience, because if it is an isolated industry, then we should have separate thing. For the complete cluster, we can have a common resilience system. We need to look into hazardous substances, consequence models, risk management system, safety and risk management, and so on. All the procedures, protocols, the resilience should be in a component. We should also make it a component of on-site of DMPs of our system. And I would not be wrong if I say it should be an integral part of every operation, maintenance, and organization's management practices. The constraints, when I look, probably I would think about it. We always have the constraint in terms of inadequate capacity when it comes to resilience, because in terms of normal functioning itself, there's always a shortage. We talk about resilience, the inadequate capacity is the biggest constraint, my knowledge. And we need to have the acts and rules and regulations should have the resilience as an integral component, because then only it can make things happen. It can guide the industry, their infrastructure be in order. We have also looked in terms of data quality and access. Information flow is another important issue because we always are very protective in information. We try to be secretive. Unless the information flow in a very open manner, transparent manner, it is difficult to have a vibrant, resilient system. Your R&D diversity is another important factor. With a simple industrial complex, there will be multiple industries, multiple hazards, multiple risks, and the variations among them should also be thought about it. We need to develop institutional framework, the framework which is available at the local level in terms of resilience, availability of investment and technology, and we should educate our people. Looking ahead, this is my last slide in the presentation, so that Rubab can feel a little comfortable. So I come to the end of the slide. So very important point is we need to have a regulatory framework. In fact, it it was also spoken by the chief guest. We have a lot of regulatory framework in terms of on-site emergency, off-site emergency, markets, and so on. The regulatory framework should also create the need for resilience. And resilience framework should be regulatory system. As I told you, we need to involve more and more institutional framework available at the local level. In fact, any institutional framework will not succeed if it is not going to happen at the local level. And evidence-based research, very important. It's like not that somebody predicts something, somebody says something, and in reality, when the people went for modeling of the methyl isocyanate, the ball, the model when they did, the actual ball dispersion ball was almost 1/3 of the actual scenario which reality occurred, because they're always concerned when it comes to research, when we try to foresee. We need to have transformative approaches in terms of all the stakeholders. They should be transformed and develop strategies. Again, another important issue. We need to develop strategies. Sharing the best practices, knowledge is an important issue. Now, the knowledge what an organization has got in terms of resilience should be spread among the other organization. There should be a complete information support for decision making. This is one important issue. When I want to take a decision, in fact, there was a call from one chief inspector. He was asking me, sir, where can we convert LNG cylinder, LNG tanks into oxygen tanks? So the question comes in terms of resilience. What is the availability and at the immediate before decision making? Because otherwise a decision making will be may not be well informed. We need to have to take in terms of capital and operational cycle, and engagement of stakeholders involving them is the biggest challenge. And we need to do it if we would like to think about resilience in terms of industrial infrastructure. We should bring more and more guidelines and code of practices. This is particularly suitable to our country, considering the ground realities, considering the different variations and sectors in the manufacturing or industrial infrastructure. We should come out with the specific and detailed guideline. We should also have more and more sensitization and awareness programs. In fact, I would honestly say resilience, we talk so much, but connecting it with the existing system is always a bigger, and we need to sensitize and generate awareness and build resilience into everyday process. Very important. Resilience should be a kind of management of change in terms of process safety management, in terms of occupational safety management system, risk management system. Resilience also should be a component, because ultimately the industries are not, they have to survive, they have to produce and have to deliver. And the gap, if the gap is too large, the survival of the industry will be a biggest concern. So we need to look in terms of every operation in terms of resilience. All said and done, the final point which every one of us will bank on is sustainability. We talk about safety culture, we could talk about any system intervention. Finally, how are we able to sustain it, considering the changes, considering the turnover, labor turnover, considering the corporate memory, considering the organization memory, and other factors into consideration. I think with this, I conclude the presentation. Thanks for the opportunity. Back to Mr. Rubab.
Thank you so much, Dr. Langovan, for your very, very enlightening and informative presentation. I think while you were in middle of your presentation, I think we started getting feedback from our all our participants and attendees who've joined us. They were particularly pleased about how you the resilience framework which you described in one of your slides. I think that is something which needs to be adapted by industries overall. And I think when I say industries overall, I mean small, medium, and even large enterprises, all over industries. But I think it's like about bringing up a cultural shift, a paradigm shift in the culture, of how we look at this, and it is never too late. Obviously, for new infrastructure development, it's an easier task to embed them into their, safety process or in their entire policy framework. But for existing networks, I am sure with so much of disturbances happening all around, be it COVID, be it extreme weather events, earthquakes and landslides and all and whatnot happening all around. All industries are keen to be, to develop better resilience. I mean, there is a definite intent, and I think the government is also doing a phenomenal job, especially, compliments to regulators. They are also promoting this entire concept, and I think of building resilience. One of the very important and pertinent points, we've noted down uh, a few of them which came out through your presentation. In fact, we were just talking of, parallelly in our group, that we would be tweeting them through our FICCI handle, because we have so many industries in our membership network which looks up to an organization like DG Fastly and works very closely. A lot of our members work with under the closely with the DG Fastly department, and I think resilience is perceived as a process of reconciling humanitarian response to disasters with long-term development efforts. And I think that is something, a key takeaway for all of us today, which is coming, and many more important, pertinent points which you touched upon. Thank you so much, Dr. Langavan. It's always a pleasure having you on our platform. You have this constant happy smile, which is very, very contagious. It's always so amazing to have you. You've participated and you've enlightened us on several occasions in the past, and I think this is a relationship which will go on for a long, long time. Thank you, and great compliments to your organization for have worked even during these difficult times on ground with industries, doing what the advisory which industries wanted, have really gone out very well and been very well received also by the industry, especially DG Fastly. Thank you, Dr. Langavan. There are a few questions, but we are already getting past our schedule. One question, Dr. Langavan, if you would, if you're okay, I'll just take from Binod B. He said, we can see many factories. There are incidents with restarting of boilers, a long time, especially in last 1 year. I think in May last year, when the first boiler incident happened, right after Vizag gas leak. Gentleman asked, there are protocols and guidelines for restart of utilities after long shutdown. Well, I would let you answer that, sir, because to my humble knowledge, yes, NDMA also issued certain guidelines, and so did your department. But can you throw more light on such restarting of utilities guidelines?
I think, see, the point is like this. Everywhere, if you go to an organization, it's not that the knowledge is not available. The original equipment manufacturer, the supplier, give the information on starting, restarting, emergency starting, shutdown. We talk about two different parameters. What are done towards starting, and restarting is you're shutting down and again restarting procedure, and shutdown, normal shutdown and emergency shutdown. To my knowledge, in fact, I was a part of the member of the High Power Committee appointed by the Andhra Pradesh government on the LG Parliament styrene issue. The basic problem is, we become more complacent. This is the first and foremost thing, is that we become more complacent in the sense that we have, in fact, I won't call friends who are attending to this program, you also understand. You ask anyone, you tell something, the first thing comes to the mind is working this system for 15 years, 20 years, 10 years, 30 years. I know much better than anyone. This is the first and foremost issue. People become complacent. Second thing is, the workforce. In fact, I said the human resource. Even whatever the kind of automation, we have so much of instrumentation, all those things. But there are involvement of people into it. We call it as adaptive automation, in the sense that the human being is used to work with automation or to get the input from the automated system to do the needful. Basically, all these procedures, in fact, 99% of the accident causes are well recorded, well documented, available in the literature. It is basically we are trying to overlook because of various other pressures, or we are trying to bypass it, considering that this may not result in such scenario. On your own experience, bypass such in the past, and by that your success, you also try to do it at the next time. Put in a simple terminology, I would say this is basically a kind of a non-adherence to the systems, procedures, and guidelines, procedure, practices, and inability on the part of the concerned, personnel to appreciate and understand the situation. In fact, I'll give the classical example of the particular incident. When emergency takes place and somebody restarting process code, the people involved were not at all technical in nature. A person with basic experience, without any background, without a safety officer, without a process engineer. Because many times during this critical period, their availability is also a question. So they try to take decisions. It's like a decision taken by incompetent people and in an area in which they don't have even a basic knowledge. This is how it happens. Otherwise, technology-wise, if you go to any accident cause, you will not come out with it is something documented, given, procedure has been laid down. Only thing, most of the problem lies with the system of not following them or intentionally bypassing them is the reason. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Saab. I think you very, elaborately you mentioned, it was just not a mere answer, but you also gave a background of how this issue has to be understood and looked at. Thank you so much. And I think that there are a series of some more questions, but I think we are really we've really skidded past. Thank you so much for spending so much of time with us. I know right now there is a lot which is happening even in Maharashtra and Gujarat. There are industries which are really in trouble. But I must also thank you for your great contribution. I know the actual report, the investigation report which came out from the LG polymer gas leak. I think it highlighted many critical aspects. And one of the things you briefly mentioned in your answer a few minutes back, there was some sort of, it was more to do with incompetency and also unavailability of the right resource because of the situation which was in hand. And I think so, as we related to the Swiss cheese theory, that a series of unfortunate events, which come together, and in all cases they come together for any untoward incident to happen. It is never one human error. Usually people want to call it a human error, but there are series of things which go wrong. But I think we need to be, this is what resilience is. We have to be prepared. We have to have layers of safety so that any critical aspect of an operation is double checked, triple checked, critical from a safety point of view, especially. Thank you so much, Dr. Langovan. I think this is all, ladies and gentlemen, we have for the day. There are questions, but please, we can take down those questions, and if there is any more, you can always email it to us. We would be happy to take those questions up with the speakers, with the eminent speakers we have. We can email them. You also had Dr. Langovan's email at the end of the presentation. He was very kind to share that. So please, if you have anything specific, you can ask him, you can ask us, we can reach out to him and get you an answer. And I'm sure he's always been very willing to answer all our questions. So I think on that note, Dr. Langovan, again, thank you, a big thank you to you, and for making this first day a great success. And we have another couple of days to go to all the participants. my colleague from NIDM, Harshit, had mentioned some critical steps to follow to download the certificate, which would only be issued once you successfully complete the 3-day OTP program. You attend all the 3 days, and do not expect the certificate to be uploaded the date the OTP ends. Give us the back office, give our backend team, the technical team to upload that and make that ready within 5 to 7 days of completion of this OTP. There would be an intimation which will go out. We will also be sharing the presentations with you, all of that, but at least give us 7 to 8 time. My colleague Akhil oversees all of that, and he would be, there are so many OTPs, and I'm baffled at times how he manages so many things at the same time. But we've been doing that very smoothly for the past 1 year now. So, on behalf of NIDM, on behalf of ED NIDM, Major General Bindal, we were so fortunate to have him today amongst us. Professor Anil Gupta, Harshit Sharma, and the team at FICCI led by General Bhardwaj, Dr. Ahmed, Akhil Gupta, Menak Majumdar, Varun Sharma, and myself. And of course, the board, which has Mr. Rajeshwar Rao, also from the Prime Minister's office, Shri SP Garg, another co-chair of our committee, who would be also speaking during this OTP. I would like to extend my heartfelt thank you to all of you who have participated today. Please use the same email ID. I'm sure you have all the instructions very clear. You all are as knowledgeable as it can get. To same email ID to register to sign in tomorrow and day after as well, so that we can track your attendance. And Harshit, I think you have also already mentioned. I saw the important points stepwise for the
Yes, sir,
audience.
I have mentioned it on chat box, sir.
Yes, and tomorrow we can also do one thing. We can perhaps have a small slide, one slide, where all these points are mentioned, and we'll display that for a few seconds, for a few minutes at the end of the presentation tomorrow, so that people know that. And also, please, as I'm saying, although the certificate will be downloadable, but don't expect to be uploaded for downloading day after tomorrow itself. Give us at least 7 to 8 days after this event is over, and we will be getting the necessary intimation to download this. And please, we encourage you to please ask us questions, although we were short of time today. But tomorrow we have a presentation which was to be made today, will be made tomorrow by Pranab Ghosh. I hope the situation in Ahmedabad, in overall Gujarat, improves, and the power cut would not be an issue, because, of course, with the power cut, you would rather want to save battery of your phone and all your devices. So we thought we can have Dr. Ghosh, Mr. Ghosh tomorrow amongst us. So that's an additional presentation which will be there tomorrow. We have one from Mr. Ranjan Mehrotra, who's the Director Marketing Operations of Oil Industry Safety Directorate, OISD, the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas. And then a very important presentation again by Dr. A.K. Nath, OSD Environment, Kolkata Port Trust. You had DG Fastly speak today. You have the director of OISD speak tomorrow. I think this is where all our eminent speakers and dignitaries were mentioning that the collection of speakers which we could get for this particular OTP is very high level, very senior level, and please attend all the sessions so that you can make the most of it. We are also available. Please, you can, we can even share the YouTube link with you. If we haven't shared today, we'll share it with you tomorrow. Every day we are available. This goes live on YouTube, so you can circulate this amongst your peers, your friends, so that they can witness this entire show, this entire OTP parallelly on the YouTube channel. So on that note, till we meet tomorrow, have a good remaining of the day. Have a good evening. Take care. Stay safe. Stay indoors. It's a matter of few more days when things will get better. So let's not jump the queue or jump the gun. Just stay there. Try and get ourselves and our family members vaccinated as soon as we can. Patiently wait. There will be spots available. Sputnik vaccine has also now been uploaded on the COVID website. That's another option which will be available to all of us. But if you have already got a co-vaccine or a Covishield, you have to get the second shot of the same. Do not think that now we have another option, we can go for that. Everyone needs to get vaccinated as soon as we can. So please support the government by going out only to get vaccinated. Otherwise, there is no other pressing reason for you to step out. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you so much.